Tonight on Free Minds TV, Mark Edgington of nationally syndicated radio show Free Talk Live joins me to discuss torture, as well as Supreme Court rulings and the continuing wave of foreclosures across the country. All that and more coming up. And welcome to a special edition of Free Minds TV. Mark Edgington is here to join me from Free Talk Live.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and if people are wondering where Toby is, Toby did get married this past weekend, so he is on his honeymoon. Obviously, that took priority over doing the show, but...
It's no excuse.
Well, you've been nice enough to come in, Mark, and so we can get an episode out to our viewers.
Sure.
And I did want to thank you by taking the time to plug your talk show, which if people don't get it in their local market, they can find it at freetalklive.com. And a lot of the ideas are similar to what we discuss here on Free Minds TV, but I would say maybe a little bit more radical.
I don't know. I mean, there was two people on the show at Free Talk Live, and we both have different opinions. Some of those opinions people might consider radical. I don't know. I mean, most of the opinions are based on peace and personal responsibility. People can call peace and personal responsibility radical if they wish, but it seems to me that the ideas of war and destruction are far more radical. However, if you Free Talk Live is syndicated on 50 markets from coast to coast, from Yakima, Washington to Miami, Florida, and it is 6 nights a week from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. live from Monday through Saturday. You can tune into it there.
All right, and let's get started with this show here, talking about some of those ideas of war and destruction. Unfortunately, people in positions of power do seem to keep a cycle of war and conflict going.
Well, before we go on, sorry, I mean, I don't even let you get through a sentence before I jump in, but really, that's what power's about. That's what war's about. I mean, war is the health of the state. It's been said many times. I don't know the quotes. I think that's a Lord Acton quote if I had to make a guess. But, even General Smedley Butler of the United States Marine Corps, the only man, I believe, ever to get 2 Medal of Honors. Maybe somebody else has one. Maybe someone else has 2. I don't know. But it would seem to me that a man who's gotten 2 medals of honor is probably a man that we can go to on the war and how it works. He was a 2-star general. What's that? Major General Smedley Butler. He said that war's a racket, that he was nothing but a muscle man for big business. And people don't want to hear that we went to Iraq for oil, but well, this month, if you take a look around, as a matter of fact, we're now sending, the United States oil companies are now sending consultants over to Iraq to, I guess consult them on their oil. And they're working out deals where they'll get a certain amount of the oil in the ground. It seems to me that was what it was about. I wish that we would have, since the United States citizens paid for that war, that we'd get some kind of discount on our oil, but it doesn't seem like we're doing that.
Well, and the other reason for going to war generally is that governments want to eradicate other governments that could theoretically pose a threat to them. So what the United States typically does is goes around the world and either invades a country or backs some kind of a coup in a country where that regime is unfavorable to the government in the United States, mostly so that they can secure business contracts for their friends around the world and just sort of grease the wheels. I mean, if you are installing political leaders in other countries, by default you exert a certain amount of power over that country, even if you don't out and out take it over and start flying the American flag over it.
Obviously, the United States government doesn't run an empire the same way that empires have been run throughout the years. As a matter of fact, if you want to know the terminology for it, it's hegemony or hegemony, depending on how you want to pronounce it. I suppose in Southerners, they say it wrong. But the United States government really installs client states and people who, people in those governments that they're satisfied with. What was Iraq going to do to the United States? I guess we were told that there's yellow cake over there. They're going to make nuclear weapons, as though just because they have a nuclear weapon that they can fly that nuclear weapon to the United States.
Yeah,
but whatever.
And clearly that has proved to not be true.
Yes.
In retrospect, it was not true. We went to war. The American public was led to support the war based mostly on lies.
Now it's about democracy. We're spreading democracy. We'll have the first democratic state in the Middle East, well, besides Israel, and we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, well, I want to get in here into how the CIA spreads
Yes.
democracy around the world. And this coming from afterdowningstreet.org. The Central Intelligence Agency crucified a prisoner in Abu Ghraib prison near Baghdad, according to a report published in the New Yorker magazine. And here's a quote coming from that article. A forensic examiner found that he, the prisoner, had essentially been crucified. I'm assuming they didn't use nails here. He died from asphyxiation after having been hung by his arms in a hood, suffered broken ribs. The magazine's Jane Meyer writes in the June 22nd issue of the magazine that military pathologists classified the case as a homicide, although the date of the murder was not given, and no criminal charges have ever been brought against any CIA officer involved in that torture program.
It's my understanding that, in fact, that's how what people die from when it comes to crucifixion is asphyxiation, because their arms somehow are lifted up and they have to pull their rib cage up to be able to draw a breath. I don't know. Never been crucified.
But it's an agonizing process. I mean, it's not like it happens within 10 minutes. It can take days.
That's why those who believe that Jesus was crucified on the cross for our sins believe the they go for crucifixion as the one if he was just had his throat slit or something like that. It wouldn't have been as big of a deal. That's certainly not agonizing, but it is. It's terrible, and it doesn't require nails for legitimate crucifixion because people were tied on all kinds of things to be crucified. Sometimes poles and trees. It didn't have to be the cross as we know it today. It's impossible that Jesus had nails driven through his hands because this bit of skin here won't hold the human, a male body. More likely it was if they did nail him, it nailed him through here.
Yeah,
through
but I mean,
here.
Regardless of the mechanics, though, I mean, clearly it's an agonizing way to die, and it was done by people supposedly representing American interests abroad. They're doing it on taxpayer dollars. So any of us that pay taxes, to some extent, it could be argued that we funded this. And clearly,
I don't see how you could argue that we didn't fund it. I would love to hear somebody, argue that you didn't fund the torture of the crucifixion of this guy. I mean, maybe that's not what you intended to do, but if that's what you do, that's what you did. We're funding the CIA, we're funding torture, and we're funding crucifixion.
Yeah, and I mean, many of the things,
being those that have to pay taxes.
Right, and many of the things that the CIA has done in the name of American interests or defending America are probably never going to be known. I mean, because they're an intelligence agency, they try to keep their activities secret, especially when they're violating the law or doing something that people would find morally reprehensible.
It's a secretive agency. Obviously, they're trying to keep what they're doing secretive. They have black ops and bank accounts that even the government doesn't know about. There's everything they do is meant to be clandestine. It's a clandestine organization.
Yeah, but they're not keeping everything completely secret. An earlier report on this issue by John Hendren of the LA Times said that other torture killings took place both in Afghanistan and Iraq, and in both of those countries combined, nearly 100 detainees have died in U.S. custody. Now, I'm not saying that they were all tortured to death. Obviously, some of them may have been injured previous to that. Some of them may have just become sick and died, as a result of natural causes.
But we've got pictures and evidence that, in fact, they were torturing people up to that point. I mean, you get your definition of what torture is, but I would like to say that the United States government called waterboarding torture in World War II when the Japanese did it. It's kind of interesting that we don't call it torture now when the United States government does it.
I believe the death sentences were handed down as a result of that, because the waterboarding was considered torture, and the U.S. made the claim that was a war crime. And it's my understanding that those Japanese who were accused of waterboarding were subsequently executed as war criminals.
But the United States government is not going to go after the CIA members and our secret intelligence agency members that did the waterboarding. Double standard again. I'm not trying to say the United States is a bad place. I'm trying to say that power corrupts.
Yeah, it certainly does, and particularly with the intelligence agencies. I mean, government at all levels, they're not really interested in holding themselves accountable. We've seen that on the local level here in Keene, New Hampshire. Even in areas of government that aren't clandestine or don't have to do with espionage or war, government's very reluctant to hold public servants accountable, its own government employees. But especially when it's a clandestine organization that operates even outside of the really crappy system of redress that American citizens have today. I mean, there really is no way to hold intelligence agents accountable because there's no information that they have to disclose. They can always invoke national security claims, and they can always just obfuscate. I mean, they're very good at deceiving people because another thing that the CIA and other agencies do is counterintelligence. So part of their job description is to misinform people in government and people in general in other countries, and probably here in the US as well. So that's their mission statement. It's very difficult to hold these people accountable. Personally, I'd like to see these intelligence agencies done away with.
I don't see anything, people don't get this, and I must admit that the way that the government is set up today, there's no way for us to operate without the CIA, the NSA, the Defense Intelligence, DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and these probably myriad of alphabet soup agencies that are out there doing whatever the heck they want to do with your tax money, and well, honestly, you don't know anything about it. And the reason that they can't do that is because there's no accountability. They just, you have to pay, and that's all there is to it. The United States government has grown far beyond what the founders had hoped for at some point. The founders had hoped that the people in the United States government would run an organization that would be accountable to its citizens, that the citizens would be able to be involved in the government, it would be open, but you can't run an empire, once again, hegemony, you can't run an empire without having intelligence agencies. You have to have your fingers in everything. Well, the country wasn't set up to be an empire, and an empire is it's an immoral thing, because the United States people shouldn't be telling the people in Iraq how to live their lives. We fought a revolution in order to have our own form of government, and if that's what they want to do, and they want it badly enough, they need to fight their own revolution in order to get theirs. I think that we should have peace and commerce with everyone, but running everybody else's business, sorry.
I mean, I will make the statement here that I'm still somebody who thinks that the government has some place in defense. I think that especially during a time of war, I have no problem with an army being raised, and I'm sure intelligence would be part of that. I mean, it's a part of any military operation. So if the United States was attacked and we needed to gather intelligence on some kind of enemy that was out there, I wouldn't have a problem with them actually running intelligence operations inside the US military. But I don't see any constitutional justification for having these supposedly civilian agencies to spy on not just foreigners, but the American people.
During peacetime, too. Obviously, their countries have been invaded in the past, and to say that the United States doesn't have a chance of some sort of being invaded would be like hiding one's head in the sand. But God has blessed us, however you want to view God, has blessed us with a really great area in the world. We have above us Canada, and below us, Mexico. I can't see either one of those nations in any time in the relatively near future, the big red horde rolling across the 49th parallel into Washington, the state of Washington or anything like that. It just seems ludicrous to me. And the reason that Canada is such a good friend of ours is because we do a lot of business with them. The people that don't, the countries that would want to attack us, it's because we don't do business. We have embargoes against them. Think about Cuba, for instance. Not big fans of the United States. I wonder why.
That's an important point to make. But I want to get quickly into the Downsizer Dispatch here. And every week we bring you the DC.org Downsizer Dispatch to tell you what is going on in the fight to reduce the size of government in Washington, or at least slow its growth. And today it is dealing with the planned healthcare expansion, nationalization, more or less. And what Downsize DC is pointing out is that a good offense is a good defense. So instead of just trying to lobby Congress people, senators, policymakers to not create some new form of socialized medicine or an expansion of socialized medicine, because about half of healthcare dollars spent currently are government dollars. A better thing to do would be to push for healthcare reform that involves completely getting government out of the healthcare business, because currently the government spends about half the healthcare dollars in the United States it's a halfway socialized system as it is, and what they're trying to do is fix some socialism with a whole lot more socialism. The better alternative, if you really want to bring down the cost of healthcare and give people actual healthcare choice, would be to do away with government interference in the healthcare marketplace. You can go to downsizedc.org and contact your elected officials in Washington. And we'll be back with a whole lot more coming up here on Free Minds TV.
Free Minds TV is brought to you in part by Life Productions for your basic and semi-pro video production needs. From full wedding and event coverage to DVD authoring and distributions, lifeproductions.com, that's lyfproductions.com.
Log on to freemindstv.com for archives of the show, the Free Minds Radio podcasts, show content and the forum, ways to donate, the members section, contact info, and a whole lot more, all at freemindstv.com.
Today, Ridley Report, Ridley here from RidleyReport.com, RidleyReport.com, Ridleyography, I am the bomb. And I just want to tell you, you're watching FreeMindsTV.com, and they're like really cool, so you should keep watching them. FreeMindsTV.com, they are good.
And welcome back to Free Minds TV. It's Nick here with you.
And Mark Edge.
And I wanted to get into an issue here that's a little bit closer to home than the torture issue we were talking about in the first half of the show. This one has to do with a court ruling. And the Supreme Court on Monday restricted how far employers may go in considering race in hiring and promotion decisions. A ruling that puts workplaces across the nation on notice that efforts to combat potential discrimination against one group with actual discrimination against another are not acceptable. And what the court has ruled here is that a test for promotion for firefighters in New Haven, Connecticut was not racist or not prohibited under certain civil rights acts simply because whites seem to do better on the tests than African Americans, Hispanics, and other minorities. Previously, there had been this idea of disparate effect, which I guess was this idea that if, say, a test or some kind of procedure seemed to favor white people or any particular ethnic group, I guess one could argue.
Then it must be racist. If white people do better, then it must be racist.
Right, even if there's no clear way to pick out any kind of racist intent.
You know, these lawsuits that are on behalf of discrimination against whites they're particularly tough for white people to talk about. Two white guys here talking about how whites should be treated fairly. And, you know, obviously whites treated pretty fairly in general, and it's difficult, and I think that it leaves sort of two questions. Is you know, what how should businesses be able to treat people as far as race goes, and secondly, what's the government's role in race relations with employers and employees?
Yeah, and it's an interesting question. There are many people who would argue, I think myself included, that employers should have the ability to discriminate. Not that I'm saying they should discriminate,
right,
but legally I don't see a place for the government to say what hiring and firing and HR decisions an individual or a company can make. It's a difficult position to argue because a lot of people will look at that and say, well, what, are you advocating discrimination or racism? And no, I'm not. I would like employers to be colorblind in the way that they conduct themselves, hiring people and treating their employees.
Well, everybody believes in discrimination when it comes to hiring practices. Everybody does. Imagine for a second the American public being exposed to a movie where Samuel L. Jackson plays Little Orphan Annie. It's absolutely ludicrous. I mean, Samuel L. Jackson, a 6-foot-something black guy playing Little Orphan Annie with a little red wig on. It's ludicrous. Obviously, we need racial, profiling when it comes to jobs and to look at people as they look. And it depends on the job. It absolutely depends on the job. I'm not for racial discrimination in most cases, but in some very few cases. And then you think about the case where the guy brought the court case against Hooters restaurant because he couldn't get hired as a waitress, and I don't know what they'd have called him, a waiter, and he'd had a little orange shorts on with the leggings, stockings that the Hooters girls have on. It's really pretty silly. So how far do you take the ability of a business to discriminate on a person based on sex or race or size or how much they smell or whatever it is? I don't know. I think that it should be left to the business. I'm of the opinion that I would not go to a business and do business with a restaurant, say, that made black people sit in the corner or didn't serve black people. I don't want to go there because that's wrong to me. If somebody wants to do that as far as their business, I guess they should be able to do it. I hope they go out of business. I think the market will decide that.
Yeah, but I think we can have more faith in the general public than a lot of people lead you to believe, because they say that if it was left up to the market like that, where people would simply shun businesses that discriminated, whether it was in who they provided services to or how they conducted their business or how they hired and fired people. But a lot of people don't have faith that, and I think particularly people do zero in on white people, the majority group. They just don't have faith that white people are going to stand up for minorities in that way. But I want to point out that a black man was just elected president, and a lot of people didn't think that the country was ready for that. They didn't think we had come that far. I think by and large, I'm not saying there aren't quite a few racists out there. There still are quite a few in a whole bunch of different ethnic groups, I'll point out. But I think the country as a whole, the vast majority of people aren't in favor of discrimination anymore and find it repugnant. And I think that's a good thing. But when you start using government to try to balance out race relations or end discrimination, you do end up with the ridiculous circumstances of an actor playing a part that they clearly don't fit in, or as you pointed out, Mark, a man trying to work as a waitress at a Hooters restaurant. So I think
not the job for me.
I mean, I think that people, the society in general, through the marketplace, can draw those distinctions between, well, what's just common sense and what is ugly discrimination that
I don't think the
ostracized.
government shouldn't be employed to enforce what is right every time and make what is right only what is legal and make what is wrong illegal. I believe that when it comes to racial discrimination, that by and large, even size discrimination, age discrimination, sex discrimination, all these things, by and large, they're wrong, but in certain cases, they're okay and they're right. So I'd like it left up to me, and I think that in this certain case, that it seems that for one, New Haven, Connecticut should be able to decide how to hire the people of New Haven should be able to decide what color they want their firefighters if that's what they want to do. I'm of the opinion that I want a fire department that doesn't look at race. Up here in New Hampshire, it's really difficult to find it's difficult to find a black guy in New Hampshire. Please send them my way. I think they're great. I just we're in my town. It's all white people in the fire department that I know of.
And I want to point out that even if people disagree with us and do believe that the government should be fighting discrimination, well, what this case is dealing with is the fact that effectively these white firefighters were denied promotion. They were given a test, which I'm assuming dealt with material relating to fighting fires and things like that. I fail to see how it was biased racially, but they were being denied promotion, even though they had passed the test and met the requirements that the city had set forth, because not enough of them were of a different ethnic group. So what in this particular case, what government is doing is discriminating against one group of people to supposedly fight discrimination in general.
Yeah, the government can't do anything right, and once again, you have a situation here where people are trying to decide what is racially biased and what isn't. And so they claim these tests. So, some people claim these tests were ethnically biased. I don't know what ethnically biased is. I am a majority, class member, or race member in a culture that has, that's mostly white. So I don't know whether they're ethnically biased, and I don't know what it's like for that. But I think that firefighters should be taking firefighter tests and not, something that would be culturally biased. But I can't speak to that. What I can speak to is I think the free market will do a better job than passing laws. If you want the government to control how people look at race, just remember they did that with Jim Crow laws. If the government is powerful enough to make race equitable, the government is powerful enough to make race inequitable, and that's a problem. If they can make it fair, which they haven't been very successful at doing so far, then they have the power to make it unfair.
Yeah, and I mean, that is a problem. Just to clarify it, while I think that employers have, I think they have the ability, the right to discriminate, even though they shouldn't. When it comes to the laws set forth by government, I do believe that everybody should be equal before the law, regardless of the color of their skin. So,
I concur with you.
If this was a story dealing with denying some minority group, whether it's based on race or religion or whatever classification you're going by, if it was some move to deny them some of their rights through government, I would certainly be opposed to that.
Well, let's remember that
in a sense, this is.
In this case, firemen are employees of the government, and I'm sort of the opinion, and this is not the most popular of opinions, but I am a firefighter, and that the government shouldn't be involved in firefighting at all. That business that wants to help people with their firefighting problems should be the ones handling it. I think that it's a service that's demanded in the marketplace. It will be likely served, the people will be served better and more efficiently and a lower price if it's handled by the free market, as it was in the past.
That is, well, I mean, that is the way that firefighting started in the United States. I believe it was Benjamin Franklin who started the first fire subscription service, which was essentially a system where fire brigades or fire companies were run by insurance companies or a pool of people that put their money into what was essentially an insurance fund. And customers of that insurance company got the services from that particular fire department. And in some cases, you would have had more firefighters than you otherwise would have because there were competing fire departments.
Now, when the government employs people, and if you're going to have a government, it's obviously going to have to employ people. If the government employs people, I think that they should be fair in how they administer that employment. The kind of fairness that I would like to see is that nobody looks at race at all. I don't think that it's much of a factor in the area of hiring government employees. Nobody needs their bureaucrats to be a particular color, unlike Hollywood that might need its actors to be a particular color. So I think that government should be fair and equitable in that. But what's fair and equitable? Here we're arguing about, well, whites do better on this test than blacks, Hispanics, Latinos, whatever. The big difference between Latinos and Hispanics. They do better on the test, so it must be culturally biased. Versus, hey, we're given the test and we just hire the people that that do best on the test. It's not. It's a bit of a conundrum. It's not easy to make a definitive answer on, and the reason is because government's involved. Because you and I and everybody is forced to pay for this organization. We don't have an option, and so therefore everybody's got their idea of what is fair.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we've angered a lot of people, and you can.
How?
I'm sure we have.
Who would disagree with this?
Now, there are people out there, and they can write to the show, fmtv@freemindstv.com, or you can write me, nick@freemindstv.com.
Or you can write me, Mark, at freetalklive.com. I don't have a Free Minds TV account, so you'll have to send me at freetalklive.com.
He'll talk about it on a different show, though.
I'll CC Nick on it, but if you can tell me my hair is beautiful, it is.
It is. I have to admit. Thanks for coming on, Mark. Really
Thanks.
appreciate it, and we'll see you next week when Toby's back. Have a good night.